Okay, let's dive right into this explainer. Today, we're doing something a little bit different. Instead of focusing on, political treaties or shifting economies, we're looking at the ground itself, the literal dirt. Because India's soil has witnessed some of the most monumental battles in human history, from the massive epic wars of ancient scriptures to the clashes that completely rewrote the fate of vast empires. These specific plots of land didn't just host fights, they actually shaped the destiny of the entire Indian subcontinent.
Before we get bogged down in dates and dynasties, I want you to ask yourself a question. Is history really shaped by politicians sitting in quiet rooms, or is it forged in the mud where empires physically clash? Because when you trace the history of India, the timeline isn't just a list of who sat on a throne. It's defined by exactly where they fought to keep that throne. So we're going to time travel through the subcontinent's most definitive battlefields, in chronological order, to really figure this out.
The idea of a crucible perfectly captures our journey today. Think about it. A crucible isn't just a pot. It's a situation of severe trial. It's where intense heat burns away the old stuff to forge something completely new. And that is exactly what these battlefields were. Over thousands of years, these violent trials literally forged India's civilization and its incredibly complex identity. Some of these battlefields built empires from scratch, some absolutely destroyed kingdoms, and some, they changed the hearts of rulers forever.
Here is our roadmap for today's explainer. We'll be moving through 4 distinct eras: ancient epics and empires, the medieval turning points, the colonial conquest, and finishing up with modern warfare and legacy. Let's jump right in.
Section 1. Ancient Epics and Empires.
What is absolutely mind-blowing about this ancient era alone is the sheer scale of time we're talking about. We are spanning from roughly 3000 BCE all the way down to 261 BCE. That is thousands of years of military evolution, shifting from the mythological epics straight up to the very documented, very real expansion of the Mauryan Empire and the arrival of global conquerors.
And that brings us to the number 18. The legendary Battle of Kurukshetra, fought around 3000 BCE, is hands down one of the most famous conflicts in Indian tradition, central to the epic Mahabharata. It was this massive, earth-shaking war between 2 factions of a royal family, the Pandavas and the Kauravas. According to tradition, the entire thing lasted for exactly 18 days. Just 18 days, but it involved millions of warriors, and it was way more than just a military clash. This is the very battlefield where Krishna delivered the teachings of the Bhagavad Gita to Arjuna. Because of that, Kurukshetra remains this profound, lasting symbol of duty, righteousness, and the incredibly heavy consequences of war.
Jumping drastically forward to 326 BCE, we arrive at the Jhelum River for the Battle of Hydaspes. This is literally where the unstoppable force of Alexander the Great met the immovable object of the Indian king Porus. The absolute defining feature of this fight? Porus's war elephants. They were completely terrifying for the Macedonian troops who had never really dealt with something like that. So even though Alexander technically claimed the victory, it was easily one of the toughest, most grueling battles of his entire military career. In fact, he was so deeply impressed by Porus's bravery and tactical genius that he just let him continue ruling his lands.
Just a few decades after that, in 261 BCE, a battle took place in Orisha that fundamentally altered the subcontinent. The Battle of Kalinga pitted the mighty Mauryan Emperor Ashoka against the Kalinga kingdom. Ashoka won, but the aftermath? It was horrifying. Hundreds of thousands were killed, injured, or completely displaced. And seeing this immense, unimaginable suffering on the battlefield completely broke Ashoka. It changed him inside out. He made a radical pivot, abandoning violent expansion entirely and dedicating his life to Buddhism and peace. This battlefield didn't just transform a king, it reshaped the entire future of Indian history by spreading Buddhist philosophy across Asia.
Moving on to Section 2, the medieval turning points.
So the really crucial takeaway here is how a single year, just 1 year, reversed fortunes and completely redrew the map of India. At the First Battle of Tarain in 1191 CE, the Indian ruler Prithviraj Chauhan decisively defeated the invading forces of Muhammad of Ghor. But Ghori didn't just pack up and go home. He retreated, regrouped, and came back exactly 1 year later in 1192 CE, and he won the Second Battle of Tarain. That single reversal was the massive turning point that directly paved the way for Islamic rule to establish a foothold in North India. Fast forward to 1526 CE at the First Battle of Panipat.
This right here is a massive, game-changing leap in military technology for the subcontinent. Babur was up against the forces of Ibrahim Lodi, and he brought something absolutely devastating to the field: advanced artillery and gunpowder. Lodi's traditional forces, relying on old tactics, simply could not withstand the cannons and muskets. Babur's technological edge gave him a massive, decisive victory. But the real so what here is that this specific battle established the Mughal Empire, a dynasty that would completely define the region's culture, architecture, and politics for centuries.
The mid-1500s were incredibly turbulent, leaving us with two vastly different medieval legacies. In 1565, at the Battle of Talikota, the wildly powerful Vijayanagara Empire clashed with the combined forces of the Deccan Sultanates. The result was catastrophic. It led to the total destruction of the magnificent, incredibly wealthy city of Hampi, completely upending South Indian politics forever. On the flip side, just 11 years later in 1576, we had the Battle of Haldighati. This is where Maharana Pratap faced off against Mughal forces. Now, militarily, the battle was pretty much a stalemate, but culturally, it was huge. It became this immortalized symbol of Rajput courage and fierce resistance. Maharana Pratap and his incredibly loyal horse, Chetak, became legends right there on the dust of that battlefield.
All right, Section 3, the Colonial Conquest. This era is basically defined by a devastating 1-2 punch that handed India over to colonial rule. First up, the Battle of Plassey in 1757. Robert Clive of the British East India Company didn't actually win this through sheer military might. He won it through calculated, cold-blooded betrayal by turning Siraj-ud-Daula's own commanders against him. That was the absolute beginning of British political control. But the real nail in the coffin came 7 years later at the Battle of Buxar in 1764. The British decisively defeated a massive combined alliance of Indian rulers. If Plassey was getting their foot in the door, Buxar was changing the locks. This victory completely cemented British dominance in northern India, kicking off a brutal colonial rule that would last for nearly 200 years.
Finally, Section 4, Modern Warfare and Legacy.
Which brings us to 1971. The entire nature of war has completely shifted by this point. We're talking modern tanks, jet fighters, and complex international geopolitics. And during the Indo-Pakistani War of that year, a truly historic, frankly cinematic victory went down in the desert at the Battle of Longewala.
Let's break down exactly how this played out, because it is wild. First, a highly outnumbered, tiny group of Indian soldiers dug in to hold their position at the Longewala border post. Second, all through the night, they had to defend that single post against a massive, completely overwhelming Pakistani tank assault. They used the tricky desert terrain and just sheer stubborn bravery to stall the enemy armor. And finally, step 3, as dawn broke, they clinched a stunning victory with critical, devastating air support from the Indian Air Force. The absolute guts and strategic brilliance executed by this small group of soldiers against impossible odds turned Longewala into a lasting, legendary symbol of modern Indian military courage.
And that brings us to the end of our timeline today. From the epic, million-strong clashes of Kurukshetra, to Ashoka finding peace in the absolute carnage of Kalinga, to the gunpowder revolution at Panipat and that desperate desert defense at Longewala, India's battlefields tell incredible stories of sacrifice, strategy, and massive transformation. I want to leave you with this final thought. Consider how these specific plots of Earth are not just coordinates on a map where violence happened. They are the actual physical chapters of India's civilization. They forged identities, they shaped major religions, and they defined modern borders. What other quiet fields out there are holding the echoes of history, just waiting to be understood? Thank you so much for exploring this with me today. Keep questioning, keep learning, and I will catch you on the next explainer.